Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. And welcome to our webinar. You're listening to Exit Talks, episode 20, From Promise to Progress, Why Content Transformation is Essential to Success Digital Transformation, with Val Swisher, CEO and founder at Content Rules. My name is Amandine Mondelis, marketing coordinator here at ExitSoft. Exit Talks is a webinar series that covers data, agile document management, localization, ExitSoft's very own CCMS, and more. We broadcast new episodes periodically, each one featuring a hot topic in the telecom industry. Now, here are a few details to keep in mind before we dive in. So about an hour after the webinar airs, we will provide you a link to its recording. You can then share it with your peers or watch it again. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session with our speaker du jour. Please feel free to submit your question into the questions section of your control panel at any point during the presentation. So now it's time to kick off today's episode. Our guest is Val Swisher, CEO and founder of Content Rules. Content Rules is an ExitSoft partner and an expert in content strategy. Val, it is my pleasure to have you as a guest. Welcome to Exit Talks.
Thank you so much, and good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. And yes, my name is Val Swisher, and I'm the CEO and founder of Content Rules. And today I'm going to be talking about content transformation and why it's essential to having a successful digital transformation. Next slide. Okay, so let's start with a couple of definitions, just so that we're all on the same digital page, if you will. Digital transformation is a phrase that I hear every day, all the time. In fact, I recently did a search in the New York Times for the phrase digital transformation and came up with thousands of articles that mention digital transformation. So, according to Wikipedia, digital transformation is the novel use of digital technology to solve traditional problems. And of course, the promise there is that digital solutions are going to enable new types of creativity and innovation rather than just enhancing and supporting what we already do. Okay, and similarly, Salesforce, their definition is that digital transformation is the process of using digital technologies to create new business processes and culture and experiences and all these great things that will allow technology to essentially revolutionize our lives in business and elsewhere. So those are a couple of definitions. Next slide. So first poll question, let me ask you, is your company currently having an initiative or multiple initiatives around digital transformation? And if you could please just select yes or no in your interface, that would be handy. So, and of course, it doesn't have to be your department per se, just someplace in your company is digital transformation an initiative that's being discussed.
So now just a few more seconds to get answers in, and I will soon share the poll.
We'll have a drum roll.
All right.
Okay.
Let's now look at the results.
There we go. So yes, so 83% of the people on the call are saying, yes, there's some type of digital transformation initiative going on in their company. And for the other 17%, don't worry, the day is young. It could still happen. So, okay, Great. All right, moving on. So get to the next slide.
Okay. So now let's see. Okay.
Okay, so digital transformation makes some really big promises. Everything from more sales to better service, right? Digital transformation is going to revolutionize service. Just think about chatbots and all the other technology interfaces that we have for better service. Whether or not a chatbot provides better service is open to discussion, but it's a promise, right? Improve customer experience and personalization. So there's this promise that if we put these new technologies into place and we all jump on the bandwagon of these new tools and technologies, that we're actually going to be able to personalize the experience that our customers have with our content. Okay, so these are just some of the promises. It doesn't say I'm going to get more sleep or lose 10 pounds, but other things, it makes these promises. So let's go on to the next slide. And traditionally, what we have done in digital transformation is we have thrown tools at the problem. And this is not the first time we have thrown tools at a problem. But when we think about digital transformation, we're always thinking, oh, I'm going to need a digital asset management system. I'm going to need a new CMS or some other new bright, shiny object. And hey, wait a second, I'm going to need a cognitive system that has AI and, that this is the way that I'm going to fulfill these promises that digital transformation is making is by throwing some new tools at it. Next slide. So what I'm here to talk about is that new tools do not deliver a new experience. You have to change your content in order to deliver a new experience. I have a saying, I've got many sayings, but my latest saying is, if you take the same crappy content and you put it into an expensive, shiny new tool, you end up with expensive, crappy content. So I've had so many customers come to me and they don't understand why the purchase of their new tool hasn't really made any shift in transforming anything. And that's because they have not done anything with their content. They've just stuffed it all in there. Maybe they've converted a file so it's no longer a dot FrameMaker or dot Word file, dot doc file, but they haven't fundamentally changed a thing. So I have this little analogy story that I recently thought about and wrote up. When I was a little girl, my father owned a hardware store, small hardware store in the Bronx in New York City. And all of us kids were drafted into working in the hardware store. Now, if you know me, I was a little girl a long time ago. We had a cash register, just one cash register. I mean, it was electric. I'm not so old that it was, one of the ones where you push really hard on the lever and the drawer opens. It was electric, but we were not allowed to use it for anything other than putting in the final dollar amount and putting money into the cash register. So this meant that when we made a sale, we would take the brown paper bag that we were going to use for all of the items that someone bought, and we would use a pencil and we would write down the price of each item. And there were no calculators. We had to total it up. And then we'd look it up in a tax table, what the tax was. And it was a little card that was taped to the cash register. And we'd add the tax and we would tell the customer this is how much the purchase was. And then they would give us money and we would have to make change in our head. We were not allowed to use a calculator to write it down. We weren't allowed to write down, oh, they gave me $20. Here's what I give them back. We had to make all the change in our head. And of course, at the end of the day, if your drawer didn't add up to what you said it was going to add up because you made the wrong change, then you had to deal with my father, which was not pleasant. So we're very careful. Well, one day we got a credit card machine. And this was the kind of machine where you put the card in and it had the raised numbers, and you put this little slip in that was in quadruplicate, and you'd run the thing across, right? Well, digital transformation, when I have a tool like a credit card machine, even if it's not digital like we have now, so back then the equivalent, I could not use this new tool that was going to make life so much easier for everybody until people got a credit card. The tool itself was meaningless. So if you think about digital transformation, it's like giving me all of the apparatus to make a credit card transaction, but the customer still comes in and hands me a $20 bill. So all of this technology is useless because we didn't change the content. And in this case, it's the credit card. And of course, nowadays, we realize that having that one credit card, I can travel when we're allowed to all over the world. And I don't have to bring euros and shekels and whatever, yen, whatever type of currency. I just bring that one card. So when my content is transformed to meet the technology, then my life is truly transformed, right? Credit card transactions, and now, of course, we don't even need the card. We can do it from our phone. This is revolutionary. This changes my life in a meaningful way. But just handing me, as you know, my father in the store, just handing me the machine and the slips of paper is worthless. So that's my little personal story on this. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what is content transformation? It's making sure that the content is changed so that it's more versatile, it's more reusable. I mean, really, if you think about the credit card, it's a perfect example, right? I'm moving from one size fits one, which is, here in the US, American dollars, to one size fits many. Now I'm using this credit card, but it's not just American dollars. It's whatever I need it to be wherever I am. So it's more than it's always the sum is greater than all the parts when I add them up. Right. So I need to fundamentally change my content so that it is more versatile, it is reusable, it is not one long monolithic document where I start at page 1 and I just keep writing to page 300 and maybe I've broken it into 10 chapters. It's a completely new paradigm of how I create and organize and think about my content. Next slide. Content needs to be ready for anything now. And boy, this credit card analogy is really good. I mean, I haven't used it before in a talk, but the more I think about it, the better it is. The content has to be ready to do anything because along with digital transformation, people are expecting personalized experiences. And a personalized experience means you give me the right content at the right time on the right device in the language of my choice. And if you think about it, we can no longer start at page 1 and just keep on writing and be able to do this at scale. And we're constantly under pressure to deliver more content in new ways, right? We need to innovate. We need to personalize. We need to move content across more channels. It does not scale to try to create separate content for every possible permutation and possibility. It just doesn't work. Next slide. So let's back up one. Back one slide, please. Thank you.
All
So
right.
monolithic content, which is when I start at page one and I keep going forever, it's not ready for anything. It's not scalable. It is not truly reusable, right? I mean, I can copy and paste and tweak to my heart's content, but there comes a point where that's going to break. It's very difficult to find stuff in there. It ends up becoming redundant and inconsistent. And isn't that interesting that I end up with redundant and inconsistent at the same time? It's bad enough to have redundant content. It's even worse when my redundant content isn't consistent. And how does that happen? That happens through something that we call content drift. So if I'm taking monolithic content, right, it's my 300-page book or my 30-page chapter or my 10-page ebook or white paper, whatever it is, if I take that and I decide that I'm going to reuse it, and to reuse it, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to paste it into a new document, and then I'm going to have at it and start changing it. What ends up happening is I start putting in differences, little teeny differences. I've done projects with customers where I'm evaluating their content to see whether it's reusable. And I kid you not, time after time, I will find 2 or 3 or 4 manuals that are all installation guides, for example, for 4 different models of the same widget. And I can tell that the content hasn't been reused in a single sourced way. I can tell it's been copied and pasted because one bulleted list has periods at the end of the bullet. And in a different document, the very same bulleted list does not have periods at the end of each bullet. Seems like that would be insignificant, right? But I am maintaining 2, 3, 4, however many versions of that same bulleted list. And I'm going to get other differences in there. I'm going to get wording differences. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to add a new bullet for a new feature to 1 or 2 of the versions, and I'm going to forget about the third version. And then I'm going to try to translate it. And I'm going to have all these different versions. And my problems are going to increase in an exponential fashion. Whenever I take content in English and I start tweaking it by copying and pasting and ending up with, 5 or 6 or 12 different versions, and then I have 8 or 12 or 24 different languages, all I have is a mess. I cannot create digital transformation where people's lives are easier by copying and pasting and tweaking monolithic content that ends up being redundant and inconsistent at the same time, even though that seems like, not possible. I can't do it. Next slide, please. So what do I need to do? Well, I need to structure my content, and I'm going to talk about that. That's what we're talk a little bit more about today, is structuring my content. There are so many benefits to structured content. Structured content is the only way to provide personalized experiences at scale. You have to have structured content, modular content that is format free, where the format is added at the point of delivery that I can use over and over and over again to create new and different assets. So I have a single source of truth that allows me to create dozens, if I want, different outputs because I'm structuring the content and I'm chunking it into little pieces that are free of format. And I am building that final asset at the point of delivery. There's more benefits. Structure is what enables automation. So if I've structured my content and I've applied a very well thought out and robust taxonomy and metadata strategy to it, now I can have machines create those final outputs by assembling those pieces of content in whatever order I need, applying that format at the end and delivering it. And it allows our customers externally and our other content creators internally to find what they need quickly. And I could spend the whole day talking about the benefits of structured content, but I'll just have one more bullet here, which is preparing for AI. AI systems do not come knowing anything. They don't know anything. When you stand one up, which is not a simple task, but when you stand one up, they don't automatically know anything. You need to train them. Structured content that is small chunks that are tagged properly. This is the fastest way to train your AI system, because structure makes sense to people and it makes lots of sense to machines. So yes, in the future, will we necessarily be in this position where we really need everything to be structured? Probably not in the future, but certainly to start training these systems, structured content is the fastest way to do it. So there are lots and lots of benefits. So next slide. Structured content is very efficient to use. It makes the whole process of creating, reviewing, approving, translating everything efficient. I create a chunk of content, a component of content, one time. It gets reviewed one time. If you're in a highly regulated industry, it goes to regulatory one time. It gets translated one time. And then I use it again and again to create all different kinds of new assets. Instead of copy, paste, tweak, CPT, it's my new acronym, my new TLA, 3-letter acronym, CPT, copy, paste, tweak. Doesn't work. I actually save money when I move into this paradigm. I don't need as many review cycles. I don't take as long to create content because I'm reusing content. I save a lot of money in translation. And then there's all the costs that we have a hard time putting a price tag on, like confusion or like not knowing how to get to the exact information I need, or how much does it cost to maintain all the different repositories where people currently store content. And then, of course, I improve quality. I improve quality because I am focused on individual components. I'm not running around trying to find the 32 different places where I have to make a change because a feature has been added. I focus it on one place. I can reinforce my brand It's much easier for me to keep that content current. It's much easier for me to make sure it's accurate. It's much easier to make sure that it follows my style guidelines. I am dealing with less content. I'm making more outputs, but I'm dealing with less content. And that's a great paradox. I can have less content to make more outputs, and I do it more efficiently, and I reduce the cost, and I increase the quality, and truly everybody wins. Everybody wins. So that brings us to our next poll question. Oh, nope, it brings us to this slide, and then we have a poll question. Sorry, go back one. All right, sorry about that. So
No worries.
we've got this mandate for digital transformation. Everybody's doing it. It's going to make life better. But if I only throw tools at it, I'm going to fail. I promise you, you will fail. I'm sorry to have to make that promise. If I transform my content, then I can fulfill that promise that says I'm going to have better service and everything's going to be improved and more sales and less cost and all the great things. And I will actually be able to deliver the right content to the right person at the right time on the right device in the language of their choosing. I've got to do the content part. I cannot just do the tools part. Now we have a poll question. Okay, so
Okay.
here's your question. What percentage of your content is currently structured as we've been talking about? Small, chunked, tagged, free of format, um, ready to do anything in the digital world. And here are your choices: 20% or less, 21 to 50, 51 to 90, and then almost all. And I don't get to vote.
All right.
So I'll
Just a
let you
few more
guys pick
seconds.
them. Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, let's
Here
take a
comes
look.
the result.
All right. All right. You know, you never know what you're going to get when you ask poll questions. Okay, so it seems to me looking at this that more than half of you are on the road to being able to deliver digital transformation, that more than half of you have at least some amount of content. And of course, I probably should have had a zero in here to distinguish between 20% and zero. There is a percentage of people listening in that are almost finished transforming their content, which is amazing. So, okay. All right, great. This is really good to know. All right. Okay. So let's talk a bit about how to transform your content. And the reason I want to talk about this, and by the way, I just want to remind you, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in your Q&A window so I can answer them at the end. So a lot of times customers don't realize, they don't understand that your legacy content that you have, that you've been working on for 20 years or however long your company's been in business, will not automatically be changed because you purchase new tools. I literally have had customers say, oh, I thought the tool did that for me. You know, like somehow the magic process of uploading your content into your new CCMS because you changed the type of file it is will magically chunk up your content and make sure that it's ready to be reused and magically tag it. And it doesn't happen that way. We actually have to do work to bring our legacy content along. So let's talk about how we do this. Next slide. There's 4 steps to doing this. And I'm going to go into detail into each one. Of course, you have to be able to find your content. You have to make decisions on what you're going to do with that legacy content. And you have to decide how you're going to transform it. I'm going to talk about different ways. And then, of course, you have to do the work, which is easier said than done. So let's talk about locating your content. Next slide. Okay. So where do you find your content? Well, depending on where you're starting from, you can find content in so many different places. When you start looking for content, you really need to find all of it. Every repository or share drive or wikis. I have had customers that had content in Slack channels, which, you know, talk about like burying your content away. You know, I'm known for writing content on the back of a napkin. Wherever you can find your content, you need to start looking. Next slide, please. And when you start looking and you start finding your content, I recommend that you start a content inventory. And you will have whatever information is salient for you, but usually we recommend having at minimum the file name, the title of the content, who wrote it, when it was written, how many revisions you have, what the last revision is, what kind of content it is, any analytics you have. Now, the reason that you're doing this is that you need to make decisions on what content, could you go back up a slide, please? What content you're going to work on. Because most companies have far too much content, legacy content, to actually be able to take absolutely everything that they've ever created and move it into structure. It's a big task. It's not for the meek. So you want to make sure that you're using whatever parameters are salient for you to make a decision on what to do with that piece of content. So you're creating the inventory because you don't know where all your content is. Not with me, you don't. And if you can't find it, you can't figure out what to do with it. And when you do find it, you need the information, the criteria on which it will allow you to make the decision. So next slide. Okay. So you have found all of your content. You have found all of the napkins. You have taken photos of them and now it's digitized. You have all your content. Now you need to decide what you're going to do with that content. Some of your content, you're actually going to take and you're going to chunk it, and it's going to be fine the way it is. You're just going to take it and you're going to chunk it up into components. You're going to componentize it. You're not going to rewrite it. You're just going to componentize it. You're going to pick most customers pick a heading level. You pick a heading level and you make components at that heading level. Okay, so you may pick a heading level 3, you may pick a heading level 2. You're going to pick a heading level and you're going to just chunk it and you're not going to rewrite it, but you're going to bring it with you into your new paradigm as is. There's going to be a certain amount of content that you really need to use that's actually quite current. It's about your current products, your current services, and you need not only to make sure it's formatted properly and it's componentized properly, but you need to make sure that you have written it so that it is reusable. Because writing for reuse is not the same as starting at page 1 and writing to page 300. There are different best practices. And you're going to end up with, if you're like most companies, yours is like most, you're going to end up with 3 or 4 or 5 versions of the same component. Because remember, you've spent the past 20 years copying and pasting and tweaking and copying and pasting and tweaking. So you're going to be looking at 5 versions that are all kind of sort of the same, but not really, because this one has periods at the end of the bulleted list and this one doesn't. And this one has this extra bullet and that one doesn't. So you're going to have to figure out what you need to do to consolidate those 5 kind of sort of the same chunks, but not really, into one reusable component. Do you put periods at the end of a bulleted list or not? I don't care what you do as long as it's consistent. You need to be consistent. Right? So oftentimes people think I'm just going to chunk my components and then I'm going to be able to reuse them. And well, yes, but you don't want to bring with you 5 versions of the same reusable piece of content, because then you've defeated the purpose. If you end up with a component that is the same as your 30-page chapter, because you haven't chunked it, you just tossed it into a topic, and or you end up with 5 components that are small, but they're almost identical, you have what I call structured authoring fail. You have failed. You have made your life more difficult rather than less difficult, because now not only do you have the same mess that you had before, but now you have more complicated tools to manage that mess. So when you take pertinent, current content that I'm going to call legacy only because it's already been written, and you want to use it in this new paradigm so you can achieve digital transformation and all those promises and better quality and less expense and all those things, you need to make sure that you have one and only one component for all the places you need it. You don't even want 2 identical components, or sort of identical, but I forgot the bullets on the end of the periods of this one. You must have one to be successful at this. So you will spend time rewriting. You have there's no other option. You will spend time rewriting, because otherwise you're going to end up with 17 of the same component and you have failed. And it's hard for me to tell you which is going to be the biggest bulk of your content. Content that you're bringing into the new system, but you really don't use it very much. So you're not going to spend a lot of time on it. You're just going to chunk it up, and it's there just in case someone needs to use it, and we'll worry about that later. Or I've got all this content, it's really pertinent. I've got, 6 models of the same widget, but I need to single source because otherwise I can't do this digital transformation thing. You will have some content that you do nothing with, unless your company is pretty young and you don't have 8 or 10 years worth of legacy content. There will be a certain set of content that you just don't have the time, the money, or the need to chunk it into modules and make sure it's written properly and make sure it's tagged properly and make sure it's format free and make sure it's in the repository. That content you're going to leave on that SharePoint drive, whatever, wherever it is, locked up because you need it for whatever, because we don't want to throw anything out. Don't worry about that content. That's not the important content. The most important content is the content that you need today. Next slide, please. So here's some of the criteria that you can use to decide, what content do I really want to work on? What content do I need to and want to spend the time on? Obviously, if the content is still in use and popular, that's why analytics help, you're going to need to transform it. If it's content that gets updated a lot, you're going to need to transform it. If it's anything that's a current visible product, you need to transform it, right? Even evergreen content that doesn't change but is in every book, you need to transform it. Boilerplate, need to transform it. Next slide, please. The content that you're not going to do anything with, that you leave as is, anything that's end of life, short-term campaigns because the campaign is over, anything that's like time dependent and an event because you don't need it in the future. Sometimes we take this opportunity to actually clean out the content that nobody ever accesses. We just don't need it. It's unpopular, not used. If the expense of converting that content, transforming that content is more than the value of the content, don't bother with it. And if you may come across content that is just so poorly written or written in such a way that you just cannot tweak it for componentized single source structure, you're better off rewriting it. Don't bother tweaking it, just rewrite it, because you will waste more time trying to tweak it than rewriting it. So these are some of the decisions you can make. Next slide. Okay, so there were 3 different buckets that you're going to put your content into. There's I'm just going to componentize this, but I'm not going to rewrite or tweak or do anything to the content itself. There's I'm going to componentize this and I really need this, and I'm going to consolidate multiple versions into one and rewrite. And there was the bucket of, this is old, I don't need it, I'm not going to do anything with it. Now you actually have 3 different ways that you can act on your content. Sometimes you're just going to convert the file formats, and that's the content that you're just chunking and kind of leaving there. But then there's 2 other things that you can do, and it really depends upon how much time you have and how important the content is. I can take that content and I'm always going to have to change the file format, and that can usually be done by machine in bulk. But I'm going to have to revise it. I'm going to have to tag it. I'm going to have to dedupe and consolidate. And that's probably going to be the bulk of what you do with your content. But you may want to go a step further at this point, because you also have the opportunity to standardize your content, to make sure that your terminology is consistent, that you always use the same word to mean the same thing, or words to mean the same thing, that everyone is following the style guide, that you are all, we're all in the present tense. None of us are in the future or the past, or whatever grammar and style rules you have. Do you use a serial comma or not? Pick one. I don't care which one. Pick one. I use a serial comma, but you don't have to. I just want you to be consistent. This is an opportunity to make sure that all of your content follows the same brand, voice, and tone. Because I want to make sure we all understand, this is something that people don't think about. when we move to this new paradigm and we move to having small, nimble components of content free of format that can be mixed and matched on the fly at the point of delivery, and then the format is applied and it's published, I could be creating an asset that was written by 3, 4, or 6 different people. This person wrote this topic, and this person wrote that topic, and a third person wrote this topic. And I am now putting those topics together and publishing them. If we don't all call a dog, if we don't all write in the same voice and tone, if we don't all follow the same rules of grammar and style, and I go to put these components together and I go to publish them, yes, technically it will work. You'll end up with an asset, but you're going to confuse everybody. It's going to read terribly. So when I start at page 1 and I write to page 300, if I'm consistent in my document, but it's not like anybody else's document, it doesn't really matter. But once I start mixing and matching components that different people wrote, we all have to play by the same rules, or my assets will be a mess. I'll be coming and going in past and present and future all at the same time. And I'll be a dog and a canine and a puppy and a hound, and I won't know what I'm talking about. So it's really important. Doing structured content without following terminology, style, grammar, voice, and tone, consistency makes no sense to me. No sense. So, next slide. And then we've got to do the work. And it is a lot of work. Do not let anyone lull you into complacency thinking that this doesn't take a lot of work. To do it right and to do it well, to be able to deliver personalized content, to enable, to be able to automate delivery, to be able to train cognitive systems, you need to work on your existing content, because otherwise you're going to end up with a big mess, or you're not going to have the components at all, right? You're not, they don't magically become topics just because you've bought a structured authoring environment. You've got the, the writing tools and the CCMS and all. It's not magic. It's work, and you have to do the work, and you have to think about the work before you start the change. If you don't plan and have a strategy for this, it's going to be a problem. Next slide. So, in summary, digital transformation is more than the next best new shiny bright object tool. And if I put the same crappy content into my expensive new tool, I end up with expensive crappy content. You need to know how to write for structure, for reuse, for components, for mixing and matching. And you need to standardize so that when we mix and match this content and we personalize it, because now we can, the asset, the content that I deliver to my customer helps. It doesn't hinder. It answers questions. It doesn't make people confused. So you have to transform your content, or you will have wasted a lot of money. Next slide. So my name is Val Swisher. I am the CEO of Content Rules, and I believe that content should be easy to read, efficient to create, and cost effective to translate. These have been my mantras for the 27 years that I have been in business as Content Rules. I am about to release, and I mean in a matter of days, my fourth book. It is called The Personalization Paradox. Can you switch the slide? Next slide, please. This is what it looks like. This is the cover. Personalization Paradox, Why Companies Fail and How to Succeed at Delivering Personalized Experiences at Scale. If you want the details of how to write for structure, of what it means to standardize, of how to actually standardize and do this, then you can get the book. You can pre-order it now at contentrules.com/TPP, or you can go to Amazon and pre-order it, or you can go to Barnes & Noble and pre-order it. But writing a book takes a long time. So it's been almost a year, and I'm very excited to release this on March 8th. Next slide. Next slide.
Okay.
You can find out more about Content Rules at contentrules.com. We do all these things with your content. We write it, we help you optimize it, we help you transform it, we help you with the strategy. So contentrules.com. Next slide.
Okay, there's a little delay. Here goes.
We've got freebies for you in the download section. So there's an ebook that I wrote on content transformation, goes into more detail. There's services description about this and our other services. And with that, I thank you, and I can take some questions. You can advance the slide too if you want.
Okay, thank you so much, Val, for this great presentation. And thank you so much for sharing the coming out of your book as well, and congratulations on that. So now we'll be moving to the question section. So remember, you can still ask a question into the control panel, and we'll be answering them now. So our first question is, how do you know it's worth to transform legacy content?
So how do you know it's worse?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so if you look at how do you know it's worth it to do so, or how do you? I'll answer it this way. You know it's worth it to transform legacy content when that content is current, when that content is important, when that content is content that you use today and you will be using tomorrow. If that content is what I call evergreen, it may not change very often, but you always need it. So anything that you are currently publishing or you might publish in the future should be transformed. Content that is old, that refers to products that have been end of life, content that you're not going to need, then I would put it at the bottom of the list. And you may want to make your list in priority order so that you get that most important content transformed first, and over time, you see how much you can get to, because most companies, the people that do the transformation of the content, still have responsibilities to create new content. Hopefully that answered it.
Thank you, Val. So our next question is, when is the right time to take on a content transformation project?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. That's a brilliant question. Let me tell you, unfortunately, there's never a good time to do this. There really isn't. In fact, I was working with a customer 2 days ago, and we determined that we had to transform a whole bunch of content. And they came back to me and they said, well, we decided we have too many initiatives, so we're not going to do that. And I said, okay, well, you're always going to have too many initiatives. It's never a good time. So, it's better to try to take this on in between product releases than, 2 weeks before your content is due, right? So if you can find a break, um, there's, that's a good time. But the most important thing is to have a strategy. The most important thing is to plan and to understand that this is going to take time. So some companies draw a line in the sand and they say, okay, we're moving to structure, and this new product with this new content will be the first uh, content that we create in this new paradigm. And or this product, we're going to just take this small subset of content and we're going to transform it right away. And of course, that's a good thing to do because you don't want to try to take on all of your content all at once and, boil the ocean, as we say. The danger, of course, is that if you don't have a strategy and you don't have a plan, you won't ever get to the rest of the content. And you'll always be trying to catch up. So you'll get to that content when, oh, we have a new feature release. Well, we better go and get that content and move it to DITA or whatever paradigm you're using and chunk it up. And now, you're always trying to catch up. So there's never a good time. There are better times than other times, but have a plan. The plan is the most important thing.
Thank you. So next question is, how far back into history should we go? So do we transfer content from 10 years ago, for instance?
That's another interesting question. What I would recommend is I would recommend going to your customer support team and finding out um, what what products are they still supporting and how far back does that go. Products that have been end of life or services that no longer exist, um, that content should be last on your list to transform, unless there's something about it that is valuable that you need. I mean, there's always exceptions. So I would, if it were my department, I would start with the most current products and the content that is about those products or services. And then I would go back in time to the point where customer support is still supporting that version or that product. If they're not supporting it and I don't have resources to transform everything, I would stop there.
Perfect. Thank you, Val. So we got a next question. It's, do you ever suggest using conversation software for content transformation?
So using conversion software?
Right.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think using conversion software is the first step. You want to transform, and you use conversion software. And there are companies that do this. We're partners with DCL, but I know there's Stilo. There's a few others. Um, the thing you have to keep in mind is that you can't stop there. And a lot of times companies think they can. So they get all their componentized content back in the new file format and they think they're done, but you're not done. You're just beginning. Now you have content that you actually have to work on because you either have to dedupe your content, and that means not having 6 topics that are all sort of kind of the same, but not really, having a single source of truth. You either have to do that before you convert or after, but you have to do it. And so many companies don't. And then they end up with 17 topics, and they're no better off than they were before they went this way. So, yes, definitely use conversion software, but don't stop there. That's the beginning, not the end.
All right. Thank you, Val. So that was our last question. And that's a wrap for Exit Talks episode 20. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Val. We're looking forward to the publishing of your book in just a couple of days. So in the meantime, Exiosoft is also gearing up for our user conference, which will take place from March 23rd to 25th. And we'll be back in the spring for our next Exio Talks. So stay put. All right. Also, if you'd like to be featured in one of our webinars, or if you have a unique topic idea, please get in touch at team.ccms@exiosoft.com. We'll see you soon.